everyone, welcome to my channel. This is Jay from Coding with Jaybird, where I upload weekly tutorials to help build your confidence in coding. This is part 10 of my video series, JavaScript for Beginners. We'll be learning about DOM manipulation today. As you can tell from my headband, it's almost New Year's Eve. I want to wish everyone a safe and happy holiday season, and looking forward to seeing you in the new year with more coding videos. Let's get started for today. I've created a DOM manipulation project folder, inside which I have a dom.html file, as you can see here. In the CSS folder, I have some simple styles, and we'll get into this in a bit. And I've also created a JS folder with a main.js JavaScript file. Now, if you look at the dom.html, it's very similar to the DOM tree that I showed you in the last tutorial, although I've added some IDs and classes to it, and I've also added an extra 2 list items. Let's have a look at this DOM tree. Here you can see I've got the same DOM tree as last week. I've added a few extra list items here, as you can see, 2 more list items, and I've added this new node called attribute. So in my last tutorial, we learned that when a browser loads a web page, it makes a model of that page that is called the DOM tree. Now this DOM tree has 4 types of nodes. The document node, which represents the entire page, and you can see that here in the blue box. Element nodes, now these are the HTML elements that make up a web page. So you can see these in the pink boxes. These are our elements, and they look like HTML tags. Then we have text nodes. Now this is text within an element node, and you can see that with these little yellow bubbles at the very bottom of every element. Now a text node can't have another child node under it. It's like the final node that you'll see. And lastly, you have these new ones that I've added called attribute nodes. These attribute nodes are a part of the element that holds them. So they're not children of that element, they're a part of the element. So these attributes would be things like IDs and classes. Since each node is an object with methods and properties, we can use JavaScript scripts to access these nodes and update the DOM tree accordingly. Let's practice making changes to our web page through DOM manipulation. Now we can see that the title of our web page is incorrect, as it's referencing last week's tutorial. We know that we're in tutorial 10, so let's change this. Now we can also see this in our browser here. If I open up my developer tools and I look inside the head, we can see that it's called Jaybird tutorial 9. So let's go ahead into our main.js and make some changes. So I'll get rid of this sidebar. What we can do is we can start by changing the title of our web page via the document object. So let's write document dot title equals, and we'll pass in a new string value of bird tutorial 10. And when I save this, we'll see that we've effectively updated the DOM tree, and here it says Jaybird tutorial 10 in our browser. So everything looks great. Okay, let's close that. Next, we want to change the H1 text. So let's have a look at that first. This H1 text has an ID of my header. So I want to target that somehow. So let's select this element that we want to modify. What we'll do is we'll store it in a variable so we can easily access this element again. So in our main.js, we're going to say let some variable called header equal document dot, and we're going to use a new method here called get elements, or element rather, by ID. And in here, we're going to pass in the element ID that we want to target. So we know the ID here was called my header. So let's target this my header. So here we're passing in the string value of that ID called my header. So what we've done is we've basically stored this location or this element by targeting it here. We've stored it in the variable called header. And now we can simply say that we want to target header dot, and we want to apply the inner HTML method to it, which equals some string value. So what we're really doing is we're changing the value of this element's text. So here I'm going to change it to DOM manipulation. So as you can see here, it says DOM tutorial. When I save this, it'll update to DOM manipulation. And once again, if we open the developer tools and we have a look at the body, the ID of my header stays the same. And now the text value inside this element has been updated to DOM manipulation. Now similarly, we can change the value of our items in our list. So our first list item is just called list item. So a quick way to do it would just be to reference the document object and then apply the get element by ID method to it and target the ID of that first list item. So if we go in our dom.html file, we can see we've given it an ID of item 1. So here, if I say I'm passing in item 1 into this get element by ID method, I'm effectively targeting or accessing this first list item. And then I want to apply the inner HTML method to it and change the text value to item 1. And when I save this, you can see it's updated here on the right, and now it says item 1. Next, we want to change the p tag. We can see that it's kind of soft over here. It says light gray, what is the DOM? So let's go look at the dom.html. We can see the p tag has a class of muted. So looking at our CSS style sheet here, we can see that muted has given it a text color of like a very light gray. But we can also see that we have a loud class just below it that has much bolder and brighter text. So let's say that we want to change this text here, what is the DOM, from light gray and from having this muted class to having this loud class. Well, we can do that using JavaScript DOM manipulation. So here in our main.js, let's select the element that we want to modify and store it in a variable so that we can easily access this element again and again. So let some variable called lead, as in like lead paragraph, equal the document object dot, and now we'll try a different method called get elements, it's plural, by class name. And here we're going to pass in the value of the class that we want to target. So the class that we're trying to target is muted. So I'm going to pass in muted in here. And what I've done is I've stored an array of elements with the class of muted in this lead variable. And the reason it's an array is because there won't just be one class of muted on the page. There could be 10 or 15, etc. So if I were to console log lead, we would see that we're actually going to get an array. So let's open up our dev tools on the right and we'll have a look at the console. And we can see we have HTML collection. And here you can see in the 0 index, we have one p tag with the class of muted. So if we had 2 or 3 or however many other elements with the class of muted, they would all show up in an indexed array over here. So if I want to access the first one, which is this, what is the DOM paragraph, I would do that by saying lead and using our square bracket notation for our array. I target the first item in the array, which is of 0 index, dot, and I would say let's change the class name attribute and set it equal to the string value of loud. Now, why did I choose loud? I'm trying to change the class from this muted class to this loud class. So now when I save this, you can see our loud class has been applied and our text looks different. What is the DOM? It's in pink and it's in italics. Now, if we have a look at the Elements tab, we can see we've effectively changed the p tag from having a class of muted to having a class of loud. We can also select elements using CSS selectors. So there's one in particular called Query Selector All that returns a node list of all of the matches. So let's say we have let list items equals the document object, query selector all, and here we want to target all the list items that have a specific class of light. So if we go back into our HTML file, we can see that all of our list items, or rather the first 3 of our list items, have a class of light, And the last list item has a class of dark. And that's where we're getting this light pink and this dark purple with the white text. And you can see that in our CSS style sheet. At the bottom, anything with a class of light has a light background color of light pink, and anything that's dark has a darker background color and white text with this dark purple background. Okay, so what we're saying here is let's target every list item that has a class of light, which basically would be these first three. And if I were to console log this list items and save it, let's open up our DevTools. And what do we see? We see another array. We see something called node list, and it's giving us 3 items in an indexed array. So this has effectively grabbed all 3 list items with a class of light. So let's say I want to change the second list item to dark. I can do that by accessing this list items, and using array syntax, I can say I want the second item in the array, which is index value of 1, and I want to change its class name attribute equal to, dark. And when I save this, you can see we've changed the second list item to dark. And we can also see that here, here in our elements when we open up our OL, and we can see that our second list item has a class of dark applied to it now. We can also select elements by their tag name. So let's create a new variable called myListItems, and I'm going to store document.get elements. Now this is a new method by tag name, and I'm going to pass in the value of li, meaning any elements that have the tag name of li, meaning a list item, they should be stored in this myListItems as an array. So console log myListItems, items will show us this array that I've created. So let's open up our DevTools again. And we can see here we have this HTML collection of 4. And all 4 of our list items are showing up here along with their designated classes and their IDs as well. So let's say I want to change the first item's class and make it dark. I can do that here by saying myListItems, items, and grab the first one, which is in the 0 index, class name equals dark. And we'll see when I save this that, there's a typo. You can see when I save this that the first item has changed to purple. Now we can also add an element to the DOM tree, but there's a few steps that are required in doing this. We need to start off by creating a new element and storing it in a variable. Okay, so let's create a variable called new item. And in new item, we're going to store this new element. So again, using our document object, we're going to use a new method called create element, and the type of element that we're passing in will be a list item. And then what we want to do is we want to create a text node and store that in a variable. So we'll say let text node equal document, and similar to above, we'll use create, but instead of create element, we'll use the create text node method. And here we can pass in a value that we want to be our last text item. So let's say new list item. So this will be, eventually the goal is to have this be at the very bottom of our list and be called new list item. All right, so now we need to actually join these two because we've created the element and the text, but they're not linked in any way. So let's say new item dot, and we want to append child. So this is a new method where we're joining the two, and we're appending or joining the text node to the new item element. And when I save this, I'm not going to see a change because we haven't placed it in our HTML document, but we can console log this to see if it actually worked. So if I type in new item, and then we open up our console on the right, we can see, yes, we've actually created this list item with the text value of new list item. All right, so everything looks great so far. Now what we want to do is we want to mark the position where we want to insert the new element. So I want to insert this in my ordered list. So I'm going to say let position equal document dot get elements by tag name, and I want to grab any element that's an ordered list. Now it's going to grab many elements. It'll be an array of numerous ordered lists because this page could have 4 or 5, maybe 10 ordered lists on it. So I want to grab the first one because we only have the one on our page. So it'll be an array with a value of 0 since it's the first item. And now what I want to do is at this position that I've marked and saved in the variable position, I want to add this new item element. So I'm going to say reference position, and again use the append child method and append this new item element to it. And now when I save it, you can see we have this new list item. Now it doesn't really have any nice styling, so let's go ahead and add a class to that. So I can say new item dot class name, and I can change its class name attribute to light. And when I do that, we'll see that everything in the background here will change to pink. Now there are many more methods that are used to update the DOM. I'll cover these in a separate series that are focused specifically on DOM manipulation at a later date. That's it for today's tutorial. If you enjoyed my video, please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button so I can continue to make more coding videos for you. Feel free to leave a comment if you have any questions or feedback for me. Until next week, keep on coding.